Because Māori have a very personal connection to the land, seeing the landscape and learning about the stories that correspond to the land gives us a very unique experience in learning.
It's really interesting stuff, looking at the power of maps and the different kinds of maps, and it increased my knowledge of and interest in mātauranga Māori. You know, because colonisation, a lot of it is about naming and claiming territories, essentially from other peoples. And so a map is actually a lot more powerful than I had thought before.
I also learnt from the project that it was really helpful to visualise my participation in the punk scene and to show how punk is impacted on the Wellington landscape as well. And the project was really good at visualising that in a snapshot.
What I learned most was really the history of mapping, cartography.
A couple of things I learnt throughout this project was firstly learning and getting to know where each location was, as I am not familiar with the South Island.
When editing and reviewing some of the work submitted, I've learnt some in-depth histories of some places and its relevance to the people. New Zealand is rich in history that is not well known to the public, most of which is Māori histories.
Oh, I learned all sorts of things actually. I learnt how to make little files, how to KMZ files and all sorts of other kind of files that I've never heard before. It was just about using the software really, and yeah, just learning the software that Google Maps had on offer, and other software that you could manipulate it with and add your voice to.
As I said, I'm not very technically savvy, so there was quite a big learning curve with using a new technology. But Google Earth was pretty user-friendly.
Secondly, I attended several workshops given by Ocean which taught me the basics on how to use Google Earth, like on how to do a place mark, how to enter text, how to import an image, and just played around with it until I found how to do it how I wanted it.
Although there were a lot of challenges with putting the project together, it did make me realise that there is an easier way to communicate a lot of our mātauranga Māori to our whānau. So yeah, I guess it was just this, for me it was a starting point to understanding what potential technologies are out there to I guess revitalise and maintain a lot of that knowledge.
The only way we've been able to show people what's in the atlas is, for instance, by uploading some of the work to iPads, taking those to tutorials and classes, and setting activities for students to interact with not just their own place marks loaded up onto the iPad, but their peers' place marks. So they've been able to not only see their own work, but other people in the class, their work as well.
It was really good to kind of have that time with the other students and get their spin on things and their ideas, and kind of bring them together for express purpose. So yeah, that was really good. I enjoyed that bit.
It was good because we all had our parts. Every individual contributed. Like if I didn't know something, I'd just ask another team member and they'll be able to help me out or tell me what I was missing.
I like the students in the field to work together as a group, because it helps the learning process. Students will understand different aspects of what they're doing, and they can then explain it to the other members of their group. And it's that group process that helps the learning. In fact, it helps it quite dramatically, because students are much happier to make mistakes amongst their peers than they are when they've been overlooked by a teacher. And I think it's a better way of learning than me simply standing over them, telling them exactly what to do.
We had on the day briefs Mick Fadgen, we were fortunate enough to have him with us, and he was awesome. He was awesome in the classroom. He was more awesome out on the field trip. Like, he would have been probably the most senior in age of everybody there, But he was, aside from himself, he was one of the most quickest to get up the hills, and he was just everywhere.
They are not to trust whatever they read without first checking it. We find that archaeological sites have positions that are very different from the positions recorded with a handheld GIS for a number of reasons. Some of these have to do with the sorts of map projections that were used in the past. Others have to do simply with mistakes that archaeologists have made in the past. But they should not accept anything without first questioning it, whether it's archaeological site positions or information that they have read somewhere. They check it before they use it. Now, the idea of this is not only to give the students an exercise recording sites, but to bring them to appreciate that the landscape that we today and their ancestors have occupied is not stable. It is a landscape that has moved. It has moved quite considerably in some instances, and that this movement, whether it's a result of climate change, tectonic activity, or human-induced change, has also affected culture. We'll be looking at how that has happened, and it's an exercise in demonstrating that we simply do not live in a stable landscape.
We'd had a few workshops beforehand just to prep us for the trip, and so we could recognise certain sites like terraces and all those kinds of things. Because most of us aren't experienced archaeologists or anything, so it was kind of fun just kind of learning as we were going along, I guess, and having each other to help find the sites. And there was a lot of back and forth between the members of the group, just trying to find places.
For me, that was a good learning outcome. We used Google Maps prior to that in the classroom with the idea of GIS to prep us for the class, which was really useful. And if you weren't paying attention then, you certainly was by the start of the trip, because you needed to. So it was great.
Just get to visit them and see what a terrace and a pit and a past site looks like on the ground. And then when they get back, they use quantum GIS to input their results again and to remap their results.
The other thing that comes out of this is that students, when they go into the field, they have a real good time. They get out into the outdoors and they see a different sort of information than what they're necessarily used to. That the landscape is full of information which they can draw on and use in their studies. And this is what makes the thing worthwhile. When the students come back at the end of their field trip, really having had a real good time and having learned something. Thank you.
Well, one thing we did in our most recent trip to Mākara was to survey two of the sites that Elsden Best, almost 100 years ago, mapped in his iconic Land of Tara map, which the New Zealand Archaeological Association doesn't map. And so the students were able to weigh up the evidence and to try to come to a decision about whether those two sites that remain unmapped by the New Zealand Archaeological Association were worth including in that database. And some of the students put a case for them being included, and other students dismissed them. So it was a really good learning exercise for students and really enabled them to think critically about the evidence that they had on the ground and at hand, and to make a decision about whether those old past sites that Elsden Best thought were past sites should be included in the database or not.
I have plotted past sites, marae, the travels of certain individuals, trees, attractions and even stars while being on the project, and I firmly believe that there are endless possibilities by using the software as a learning medium.
There's no substitution for going out in the field and having a look. And there's no substitution, like I said earlier, to standing on the cliff and feeling the sun on your face, or the breeze, or the cold, or the aches in your bone. You've got to live it. The technology is awesome, but I think it's got to go hand in hand with living the experience firsthand.
And students, just the opportunity to do something different, to do something that's visual, to do something dynamic, to give the students the excuse to actually get outside, get outdoors, to reconnect to place.